All right, I'm going to go ahead then and welcome all of you. I should say welcome you all, but I think people hate when when people from outside states that use y'all decide to use it. But I will say welcome to you all to the Texas Workforce Integration Academy. This is our landmark day, the kickoff webinar. I'm Sandy Goodman. I'm one of the two facilitators for this academy. I'm really excited to be here and am honored that the Career Pathways PhD Center and Texas Workforce Commission have put their trust in us. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me and then introduce also my co-lead and co-facilitator, Mark Goldberg. So as I said, I'm Sandy Goodman. I direct the National College Transition Network, or NCTN, as some of you might be familiar with, based at World Education in Boston. Our work is really centered around the intersections of adult education, workforce development, and post-secondary education to really build a integrated and collaborative ecosystem in which our adult learners, workers, and learners can really set educational and career goals and access the opportunities for improved employment and educational services. So that's in general, what we do at NCTN and my work in particular. I work in states, I work nationally. I've done a lot of work, even going back to the days of the Great Centers and Texas Learns, and have contributed to your states building the capacity for career navigator services. I've worked on integrated education and training initiatives like Accelerate Texas, and also initiatives like that nationally. I do a lot of different work, program development work, to build the capacity of our field institutionally, as well as for individual practitioners. And you'll learn a lot more about me and about our work at NCTN and World Education throughout our 6 months together. So I'm going to just go ahead and pass it on to Mark Goldberg, my colleague, and invite him to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So Mark Goldberg, I'm the owner principal for Skills Strategy Consulting. So I work as an independent consultant, and it really is a thrill, like Sandy said, to get to work with all of you on this academy. I've been in the adult education field for about 20 years. I used to teach ESOL and then was the director of programs for a community-based organization down in San Francisco. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I've worked for the community colleges here in our region. For about 15 years, I was the Dean of Adult Education and Workforce Development, so I had the opportunity to oversee programs that had WIOA 1 funding and then also Title II, and did a lot of work with IET in scaling programs at a few different colleges. So look forward to working with you all. I've done other national projects with colleges and workforce boards and other entities in other states, and a few in Texas, but I'm really looking forward to engaging with you all, learning about your programs, and spending time with you over the next number of months.
And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Trey Daniel to make some introductions and welcome remarks.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to finally kick this off. This has been a project of love, definitely. We have worked. It's taken some time. We're excited about the content. We're excited to have you guys and your experience at the table. You as directors are, part of the backbone of our program, and we want to make sure that we're doing things right. We are looking forward to the next, I guess right now it would be next 3 months, 4 months, finishing out this academy, and we couldn't be happier to have the response we had to the participation. One thing I do want to touch base of, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. Feel free to raise your hand and unmute and ask questions when it's warranted. Also, we will have evaluations typical of the PD portal that will be listed on your transcript. So at the end of the program, please fill those out. That will help us out immensely. And I'm going to turn it over to Ann with TWC.
Yeah, absolutely. So welcome. I just want to Thank you all for being here. We're very excited to get started. First, thank you for going through that application process. We know that takes time, and you all had very thoughtful responses. So we're breaking new ground with this event, and we're moving through it with World Ed, really with a continuous improvement approach. So as Trey said, there'll be evaluations that we want you to complete so we can keep working on this academy and improving it for the next cohort. And I want to thank Mahalia for a focus on the importance of this initiative and for being with us today. I'm going to turn it over to her in a second. I want to thank Trey and his team, Olga, Train PD, for managing all the behind the scenes, and to my colleague, Lori Slayton, who manages an array of state leadership PD projects and whom I work with on this career pathway effort. So I want to turn it over to Mahalia to welcome you, and we'll keep moving forward. So thank you for being here.
You're still muted, Mahalia.
Gotcha. Good afternoon, everyone. I don't think this is my time to share my screen yet. I was told 2 o'clock, so I'm just saying hello and welcome. Sandy's shaking her head. She's like, yes, don't start. But thanks so much for joining and just being and showing interest in this. We've been working at the state level for some time on how to get these big systems to get more connected and more integrated, and then sharing sort of that knowledge and those inner workings with you guys, because y'all are the ones that are out there in the field and the practitioners that have to put all of that into practice. So I just wanted to thank you so much for spending your time with us and for, jumping in and learning more about how we can do better work at those local levels. So thanks again.
Thanks, and we'll move ahead forward then to talk a little bit about today's agenda. So this is really, and I'll say this now, and I think it comes up later, probably the most information out of any of the events that we will have, but still we definitely want to hear from you, and we'll leave time for you to put questions and comments in the chat, to raise your hand and speak. But the reason why this agenda is kind of information focused is it's our time to just really establish a shared understanding of the work ahead of us and the kind of framework we're going to use and the expectations for all of us around this work. And so for that reason, it's a little bit information heavy. So we're going to start with just making sure we're all clear about the goals and objectives for the Workforce Integration Academy, talk about our agreements and expectations, what you can expect of us, what we'd like to ask of you and expect of you. We're going to talk in an overview about what the project you'll be working on. We're calling it a culminating project, but it's really an iterative project. We'll have work for you to do, and we'll start to talk about that today, what you'll do over the course of the academy. When Mahalia is back on, she's going to take about 15 minutes to give Workforce 101. Again, we're going to dig deep into these topics throughout the 4 months together, but we wanted to just give her a chance to say, this is our vision. This is what we're talking about when we talk about, workforce integration. And then we're going to introduce you to a framework that we're going to use throughout the academy, but certainly in the first activities of the culminating project, and then just get into some next steps. And as I said, throughout, we will take some time to pause and give you a chance to reflect, ask questions, and share comments. But first, let me talk a little bit about the academy goals and objectives. And these are goals and objectives you would have seen when on the application when you decided to apply and to participate, but I just want to go over them again. And I'm really going to read these, which is not typical for me, but just to make sure we're all clear, the goals and objectives are to provide information, tools, and time, really time to dig in for AEL providers to learn about and develop strategies for improving AEL, workforce board, and community integration to increase support and services that will promote student retention, transition, long-term employment success, maximize student access to training and employment opportunities and support services, strengthen and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of the workforce system, ensure business and industry needs are considered when planning AEL career pathways programs. So these are our goals, our long-term goals and objectives. I think we all know this is complex work. It's work that takes some time and some thought and some reflection, some networking and communication with your staffs and in your communities with your workforce board staff. So they are aspirational. This is where we want to get. We know that this won't all get tied up in a nice box with a bow at the end of the 4 months, but we think we're going to really dig in and to get you on your way to these goals. I'm going to pass on to Mark for a minute just to give you an overview of the culminating project.
Yeah, so Sandy mentioned that a slide or two ago, and as she said, this will be an iterative academy, an iterative process, and we want to build on the learning and the activities through the time together. And that's for you as AEL directors, but we also want to invite you and hope that you'll engage with your team members, your faculty and staff in your program, so that they can be a part of it through these culminating project activities. And so it will be research, reflection, and also an opportunity to engage not just with your own teams, but with your workforce development board staff partners to dig deeper into the workforce development board and the programs and services that they offer to identify where there are integration opportunities to build on or to enhance. And so that will be the culminating project. Culminating seems like the wrong word because it sort of sounds like it's going to wrap up at the end. And if anything, we want it to be in a way the opposite, like it's a jumping off point. So you're going to be building on the work to then develop next steps so that when the academy ends, you have a plan, maybe it's an informal plan, and a path forward to continue to integrate. So culminating in a way that the academy will wrap up, but that the work will continue on. And with that, there will just be a portfolio of work that you can share with your colleagues, and that will all be organized in the community of practice through the portal. So we want to shift from there and just see who's here. So we have a great map that indicates all of you. So where you're coming from, your program. Just want to give you a second to take a look at this. Just a helpful illustration. And as you do, I'll just add, Sandy and I shared a little bit of our backgrounds, but we recognize that you all bring tremendous insights and expertise to this work. And we also understand that each of your regions may be different and may have unique elements. And so the Workforce Development Board in one region, and the size and the geography and the industries that are critical and the student populations are all going to be unique. But all that's to say we can still learn together, and would invite you all to share your insights, your questions, your experiences with such a robust and dynamic group. So that's a little bit more. We wanted to come back to the application, and as Anne touched on, you all spent time completing the application, answering questions, and we wanted to spend a little bit of time. And I think another sort of layer of the diversity that you all bring to this was seeing your knowledge and experience of the Workforce Development Board or the workforce system. And you can see that there's a large group, 70% that had somewhat knowledge of the board, and some that were little, maybe 25%, and others that had a strong knowledge of. And so I think with that, it's just a great way to come together, to bring questions, to bring experiences. And I'll just back up to already reviewing some of your introductions on the portal and seeing just again, the richness of the experience that you have. So I think it's going to be great to have that diversity of backgrounds and experience with your Workforce Development Board, as well as your AEL programs. So I think with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sandy to go a little bit deeper into what you shared in the application.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So we didn't want to ask you to just repeat here all of what you shared in the application. I think it was Anne who thanked you for filling it out. We wanted to use it partly as a little bit of a needs assessment, as a way to, and a strengths assessment, frankly, and just start to get a sense of what you were wanting to get from the Academy, what you were bringing to the Academy to help us shape the content. So what we've done, and I thank my colleague Gina Davis, who's also on this call, who helped us summarize all of what you shared in the applications, is just given you a little bit of a kind of some of the high level trends that we saw, and starting first with the strengths. And I think you'll hear this theme a lot. I think we've already said a few times that we really think it's important always, as you do with your learners, to identify strengths and build on them, even as we're trying to cover new ground and take steps in new directions. So these are a summary of some of the strengths that that we found in common in your applications. Employer relationships are a strength you can build on, information sharing and marketing, integrated education and training programming, a formalized referral processes, connections to your community, and a motivated team, which is probably the most important of the strengths of all of those here. But I wanted to invite, for example, folks who said employer relationships were a strength, whether you've said it exactly that way or in your own way, just to ask for kind of a show of hands who identified employer relationships as a strength that you're bringing to this work. I think you all know where the hand raise, you could do a thumbs up, you could do a hand raise. Donna said that she did. Monica, Sandra, Andrea. That's great. I'm scanning. Juanine. And then I'm wondering if one of you would be willing in the chat or to unmute and just tell us a little bit more about that. You have the power to unmute yourselves. So if that's something one of you would just tell us, flesh that out a little bit more for us. What do you mean when you say employer relationships are a strength? What does that look like?
This is Donna. I'll go first. Well, from my previous work experience in business development, it was understanding the needs of a corporate partner, understanding that you had to identify mutual benefits, that there should be some mutual benefits, and just developing a relationship around the person, understanding their corporate culture, and being able to come alongside them, whether it's, to educate their employees or to assist them with, upgrading or elevating their processes. It's really about business relationships. It's developing relationships. So that's it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Donna. Would one of the other folks who identified employer relationships as a strength be willing to unmute and tell us what that looks like?
Hi, Monica Stansberry
Great.
from Dallas. So Dallas, we have to do everything based on our workplace data. And Dallas College has spent a lot of time just in the city of Dallas working across different sectors to provide partnerships with our group. We have apprenticeship programs, and we run a lot of those through the IET. We have a local partnership with the hospitals to provide PCT supports. And we have both programs, some that the folks are in training programs, but then we have some that are going directly into an apprenticeship while they're going through their IET. We work with a program called BankWorks that is sponsored out of, it's through a nonprofit, CareerWorks, where we invite the folks go through the training programs, and we invite our local banks to come and interview at graduation on the spot. So when those folks finish their program, they are many times hired right there that day after graduation, or invited to a second interview. We work with the Regional Contractors Association so that we have a second chance model that folks who are going through different programs sponsored by TxDOT, TWC, all of those from the dollars that provide, supplies, training for them. They are hired day one, and then they go through the program. We have to contextualize those programs. And so we have a lot of, those are just three.
Thank you. And did you say it was called BankWorks? There was a question in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Great.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yes. So
BankWorks.
those are
Thank
just
you.
three examples of some of our most successful programs out there. But at Dallas College and Workforce, one thing I like that we have done is make sure that our instructional focus is that's under Workforce is tied to our CE programs. And we kept a slice of instruction separate from academic instruction so that we could merge and layer programs.
Thank you so much. And so we'll continue. And Andrea, I know you had started to speak up, but I think we'll move to another topic. But I hope that you all will continue to share in the COP, share throughout our conversation today. And in addition to sharing these strengths in employer relationships, also let's sort of discover together how those strengths with those employer relationships can be used to continue to leverage greater integration as models of, working with employers. Let me just pick another strength, the formalized referral process. A couple of you talked about that. Would somebody be willing to just talk just briefly about what that formalized referral process looks like as a strength in your program or in your community? And Monica, it looks like you're still, no, you're muted. It looks like you're unmuted, but you're muted.
So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you guys. This is Stephanie Ross with Harris County Department of Education, and I apologize. I'm at home sick. I have COVID, but I definitely wanted to be here today to kick this off with you guys, and I'm super excited about it. And I won't participate a lot. I will be doing a lot of listening, but we do have a very awesome collaboration relationship with our workforce solution centers. In our connect, it's called the Connector Project. And so we have a formalized referral process, whereas the connectors ourselves as well as the workforce centers refer students that are looking for GED or ESL support to us, or even training to us. And we, in turn, once our students have completed our program, specifically in our IET program, we refer those students over to those centers to get support for with employment and career readiness. And so we actually track that. We use data, lots of data, to inform our decisions, as well as make the continuing improvements necessary to broaden our reach. And so this is, I believe, our third year doing it, and we've had much success. We've had more than 75 to, I think I'm going to go with 80 students to go through that program. And it's really strengthened our relationship with the workforce board, I would say, in that our students don't look at us as separate entities. They look at us as one. And so that's our process, and it's been working pretty well.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I wish you rapid recovery.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being here. Really, thank you.
Sure.
So what I want to say is that I know that there are many strengths that you all have to build on, whether they're listed here or others that you identified in the application. So one, I hope that you'll continue to share those examples in the community of practice and at every event that we have. And also just to keep reminding yourselves that those strengths are our foundations to build on. And we want to be drawing those out from you so that we can really help you think about strategies for building on those. And thank you, Irene, for your comment. Irene mentions that they have worked with an interagency group to create a robust referral system in JOT form where we can refer in one agency form. The other reason why we're kind of really want to surface your strengths is that you will be the source of learning for your peers and for us, I think. Certainly we plan to bring in other presenters and speakers, but we know that there's a wealth of expertise within this room, that everybody has room for improvement, but everybody also has some strengths to share with others to enhance their learning and strengths to build on. So we'll end with the strengths there, and then I just want to give you a summary of some of the challenges and then the topics that you were interested in, and then we'll move on. So I will say that far and above all the other challenges, most of you identified turnover, your staff turnover at the workforce board staff, turnover in the contractor staff, and then of course even turnover of the contractors, that the folks that were doing refugee resettlement are no longer there and it's a different agency, for example. So we will definitely spend some time digging into what kind of strategies can mitigate that turnover to really sustain your current integration work and to grow it and sustain it even further, and turnover is a big challenge to that. The referral process, and we've heard from folks who have formalized referral processes, so we hope that those of you who find that a challenge can pick that up from others. Building trust, and of course that's related to a sense of competitiveness that can both be challenges to this integration work. And then we asked you to identify topics that were priorities for you as we start to shape the content for the Academy. And these came up, and they're very interrelated: leveraging partnerships for support services, leveraging partnerships for integrated education and training collaboration, and innovative models and strategies for workforce integration. So really thank you for all the thought and effort and openness you put into the application so that it could help us shape this work. And just please continue that in the community of practice and in future events. And I'm going to just go over some of our community agreements and expectations. And starting with us, what you can expect of us. First and foremost, you can expect to be, for all of our sessions to be interactive and engaging. Like I said, this is probably the most information out one that we will have. But we really want to tap into your expertise to, again, to identify and build on your strengths and to respond to your challenges. So we really want to respond to what you're interested in and what you need in order to move this work forward. I think I pretty much talked about all of them. We want to build on your strengths, draw on your experience and expertise. And then also we want to share perspectives and approaches that come from Texas, that come from around the country, always with a thought to how you can apply those locally, not just locally in Texas, but locally, because every community and every partnership and every region are going to look different. And we understand that, and we'll always be acknowledging that and helping you think about how to take something that's a really great idea somewhere else and think about how it could be modified to work for you. Here's what we want to expect of you, and hope that you can agree to these expectations: to be open, present, and engaged. That means, to the extent possible, you've cleared aside time for the webinars and the face-to-face events. We ask that you try to really give yourselves the gift of that time and be present. Try to put aside email and other work. Put aside your phone unless you have, emergencies that you need to be available for. And as the folks who stepped up earlier, just to be engaged and be open to sharing your ideas and your experiences, to step up and share, and also to, share that platform with the 25 of the other folks that are here. There's a requirement that you attend all sessions. If there's an issue with that, I think we're asked to put that in your application, and I know the CPPDC will be talking about accommodations for folks who have to miss a session in an emergency. We ask that you complete all project activities in between sessions so that you come to each event having done the culminating project activity for that period and really ready to share it, to talk about it, to use it to further your learning and all of our learning together. And everybody's situation is different. Your staffing is different. Your program is different. Your student populations and the demographics of your communities are different. Your histories, your longevity in your program, and the relationships with your community and your workforce board are all different. And we start with that understanding that there's not a cookie cutter approach, but at the same time, we know that there are many common threads that we can draw on. And we want to ask you to be able to certainly talk about the challenges, but also be willing to try new approaches, to talk about how your situation or your context is different from that of someone else or of a presenter we bring in, but also be willing to and open to thinking about, okay, but there is a grain here that I think could be helpful to us. It will look different for us, but I'm open to considering it and looking at it from different angles. So I think I'll pause there and just Irene is appreciating the acknowledging the differences, and I think we'll go on unless there are any questions about the expectations. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass the stage to Mahalia, and we'll just take a second for her to get her screen and her slides up.
Yes, give me just a second here, folks. I thought I had it ready to go, but here we are. Let's see, y'all let me know just so we can make sure that I'm sharing the right.
We see that same beautiful slide as before.
Okay. And am I progressing?
Yes.
All right. I'll tell you, as long as we've been in telework, which has been several years now, it's still just trying to get things like going and get the technology working for us. I feel like it's always just a struggle. So thank you so much again for joining us. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. Number one, because I only gave me 15 minutes. And even though I love this topic and I could probably talk all day about it, I know that you guys have a full and packed agenda today. And I do want to acknowledge too that we do have a big variety and sort of a spectrum of folks that are joining us. So this is really meant to be a very high level kind of overview and workforce 101. We're all coming into this from very different places in our journey with making and connecting with integrated models in our local areas. So with that being said, I wanted to kind of start with talking about what the 6 purposes of WIOA actually are. So these are the simplified version of these. These are actually very long, but here are the six purposes under WIOA. And they kind of go back to, I'm not going to read them off to you, but they go back to all of the things that we've really been talking about and looking at the strengths, the challenges, and the priority of topics that you guys mentioned in your assessment. You can see by looking under these 6 purposes that that's really what we're trying to accomplish with these different integration approaches and with just working with our boards in general. We have a lot to offer each other. If you really think about TWC's, I think perspective when it comes to the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act specifically. So we at the Texas Workforce Commission have to develop something called a combined state plan. And in that combined state plan, we're taking all the titles that exist under WIOA, which is Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. So there are 4 of them. We've talked about that many times with most of you. So I think you're all very comfortable and familiar with what all the titles are. But the simplest way to really think about all of those titles working together is this. We want to develop an integrated system. We want to implement enhancements that strengthen that system once we develop it for the sole purpose of one thing, putting people to work. So when you really simplify it in that way, it helps, I think, to keep things pretty simple for us as well when we're thinking about just the connectivity that we need to have with our local workforce development boards. They are the ones that manage many of those programs that fall under WIOA. But I also want to expand on that because there's so many more programs that the board operates that have that don't fall under specifically the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act. And I don't want us to get pigeonholed into a place where we're really focusing on those 4 things solely, and we're not really thinking holistically from the customer's perspective and how they can benefit from an integrated service model. So when we're talking about boards, there's just a couple of questions that always kind of come to mind. If I was very new at this and coming into this, these are the things I would want to know. How are they established? What type of programs do they offer? And what's the difference between a board member, a board staff person, and a contractor? Because those things become very important when you're really talking about building partnerships at those local levels. So here in Texas, we have 28 total local workforce development board areas. Each of these areas receive funds from the Texas Workforce Commission to carry out required programs and services. Now, if you think about the relationship in each of those local workforce board areas, there is sort of this hierarchy relationship. So a lot of times, at least, and I'm totally guilty of this too, we say the board. And we say that a lot, but what does that really mean? It's because there is a layered approach here. So when we say the board, there could be numerous things that we're talking about. And I think it needs to be clear when you guys are thinking about those local partnerships, what does that really mean? So the board members are actually established through their chief elected officials at the local area. Those nominations come to the Texas Workforce Commission, and we approve those board members. The board staff are the paid arm of the local workforce board. They conduct the day-to-day operations. They have to implement all of the board decisions, and they have to monitor their contractors. So they're the ones that really are there to make sure that everything is in compliance, everything's working correctly, but they do not provide direct services to customers, which is why they need to procure a contractor. So the contractor is there to really carry out those programs and services to those customers on a day-to-day basis. So many moons ago, when I was just starting in adult ed, and I had, we were gung-ho technical assistant staff, and we're like, we're going to go out and meet with this AEL provider, and we're going to go over to the Workforce Solutions office, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about how we can really facilitate referral processes. And I said, no, we're not. We have to go through the board. I always kind of keep that in mind, and a lot of folks, and depending on the board area, there's not much, difference, but the boards are the ones that are ultimately responsible for creating that local flexibility and all of the local policy. So we definitely want to make sure that when we're working on these partnerships, that we're working at that board level. Now, the mission of the local workforce board, there's a lot, but I kind of just threw it into 3 buckets here. The first is to assist employers with their hiring needs. The second is improve the quality of the local workforce in that area, right? The laborers, the people that are working with those employers. And the third, there are many programs that the boards operate that are geared towards reducing the dependency on public assistance. Now, depending on which board you talk to, some may say and really say our main focus is those employers. That's our #1 customer. And then some will say, well, it's kind of a mix. Yes, we want to serve our employers, but we also really want to have that human capital impact of, reducing the number of people on public assistance. So there is variation across the state in terms of the board's local mission, but that's important for you guys to kind of get to know what it is. Also, the boards have local flexibility. So unlike AEL providers, in some respect, I like to think we give you guys lots of local flexibility as well. But the boards have local flexibility in how they really make decisions to implement certain policies that TWC is putting out. So they get to customize, and as Mark was saying earlier, you know, the demographics in every area is very different. So the boards need to be able to make decisions that are going to be best for the constituents within that area. East Texas doesn't look like West Texas. North Texas doesn't look like South Texas. So the boards are really responsible for bringing that forward. Now, when we're thinking about, or when I think about the relationship between the Texas Workforce Commission and the local workforce boards, you know, I think about TWC kind of being the foundation, right? So we're the foundation, we put out policies and we say, at a minimum, this is what we need to do to be compliant with these federal dollars. And a lot of times it has to do with what is just in federal statute or regulations. And then the board is sort of the frame on top of that foundation, and under their roof, they have all sorts of programs. So to the left here, you'll see that not only do they operate the 4 titles under the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, which is vocational, well, let me start in order, which is the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act Title I, which has to do with adult dislocated worker and youth. They also operate the vocational rehabilitation and the Wagner-Pfizer, which we refer to as ES, which has actually been around since like 1933, and then reauthorized several times. So they have those 4 titles that they manage, but they also have numerous other programs. The Choices program is specific for individuals that are receiving temporary assistance for needy families. They help those individuals look for work to hopefully reduce that dependency on public assistance. There's numerous other things, the SNAP program, for instance. So when you think about those other programs, it kind of expands the opportunity, I think, for AEL to be able to be of service to the board. Donna mentioned a term earlier, and I've put it in my PowerPoint somewhere in here, but it's that mutual benefit. It's what we really have to offer one another that gets those conversations started. The other thing to keep in mind is that each board has something called a priority of service. So in federal and state has a mandated priority service here in Texas, eligible veterans, foster youth. But then we also have other priority areas which each board makes the decision about how they want and sort of what priority of service they want for certain populations. Some of them are recipients of public assistance, low-income families, low-income individuals, and then basic skills deficient. So one of those terms is very familiar with us, right? Basic skills deficient. That is the sea in which we swim. So that is a term that we are very familiar with. Now, depending on which title under WIA, depending on what program it is, there may be some slight differences in that definition, but the term itself really is about illiteracy. Right? It's about the lack of literacy and numeracy skills for an individual. And so when you think about the mutual benefit that AEL can bring to the table when working with the boards, I always like to hone in kind of on this priority of service. Now, at the state level, there are certain things that, you know, we're looking at maybe being able to do it to kind of require the boards to focus a little more specifically on some of these areas like basic skills deficient. Hey, 20% of your funds need to be used for this purpose. And so those things also exist at the board, and the boards have will know more about that when you get into those conversations. So when we really think about that illiteracy and the impact on society, so even though that basic skills deficient term I think is very familiar to us, the other ones in terms of public assistance, in terms of low income, illiteracy has an impact on that. There's been numerous studies done. We know that illiteracy oftentimes correlates to individuals that are on public assistance, low income, low wage or earners, lack of employment, incarceration rates. There are lots of things and lots of studies out there that correlate these things. So even though the basic skills term seems probably the most familiar to us, those that are on public assistance and those that are also low income have a big role to play as well, I think, in the conversations when we're talking about partnership. Also, I would just say on that route that Texas, we have some real Texas-sized challenges, right? We're a big state, we have a lot of big need. When you think about the integration of some of these things, you know, that's something you always want to keep in mind, because that's really the purpose for providing these integrated services, is because we're trying to reduce several of these numbers. I love the gear analogy when we're thinking about integration, right? Because gears serve a purpose, and in each mechanism, they are there and they work dependently upon each other to get something accomplished. And when we're thinking about our integrated service models with our local boards, for me, it's always back to the customer. I've been saying this for a couple of years. You guys are very familiar, but when you really start sitting down and you're talking about all the different performance measures and all the different eligibility requirements and all the different things from all the different programs, if you really kind of keep this customer-centric model, I think, present in those conversations, and you're really keeping a focus on this model, it always helps, I think, to just come up with something that just makes a whole lot of sense for everyone. When you're thinking about this customer-centric model, also keep in mind that we do have some compliance. So under WIOA, it requires that the boards enter into an MOU with you, the AEL grant recipient. But I'm gonna tell you right now, and I really encourage you guys as you're working through this process, think about this not as a compliance exercise. You can certainly do that. I know many folks do, but it's really an opportunity. So while you can do this as a compliance exercise, say, yes, we did it, and yes, the MOU contains all of these elements, what you really should be looking at is, does the MOU have metrics? The board is going to refer X number of people to me every month. I am going to refer X number of people to the board every month for these services. Does it contain specific requirements and responsibilities for both parties? And then who's going to oversee the implementation? That's probably the most important one, because you can put anything in there, but if someone's not making sure that those quarterly meetings are happening, and someone's not making sure that the data is getting looked at, and those perspectives, and there's not that implementation piece, then chances are we may be in a little bit of trouble there and actually being able to do that. So I really just want to, and hopefully as you go through this process, and I think you guys already know, as you learn more about these board operated programs, that you really, the boards and you and everybody can see that AEL has a lot to offer, especially when you think about those priority populations. And what AEL service really does the board need from you the most? It's a great topic and a great conversation to have. Start there. A lot of times they just don't know everything that we do, and we have a lot to offer, in particular to help them meet their performance measures and provide, again, at the customer level, that customer-centric model where you're really putting them and meeting the customer's needs for career pathways. So I know I'm a little over time, so I'm going to stop there. And I know we had like 5 minutes planned for any questions, and I'm happy to take those.
Thank you so much. We called that setting the table, and boy, you really gave us a very digestible banquet. Really, thank you. That was exactly what we hoped, just to kind of, we know that's a review for many of you, but just to get clear what we're talking about when we're talking about this work. So yeah, we have time for a few clarifying questions for Mahalia. So this isn't the time to sort of say, how do we do it? Because we're going to spend the next 4 months doing that, and it's not an easy answer. But if there are clarifying questions, something you missed, something you didn't understand in her remarks, this is definitely appropriate to ask that now.
Mahalia, this is Mary Jo. So I was going to ask, so how can we do this just so that we can start working on it now, but I'll hold that back. And just, I guess to clarify, one of the things that I appreciate from your slides is the customer-centric type of mentality, right? And I know that we in AEL have a lot of flexibility. When it comes to the Workforce Solutions branch, not so much sometimes. Every once in a while, we are blessed to have a person that understands us and over there at the Workforce Solutions side and wants to have that customer service and customer-centric mentality. But it's a bureaucracy, right? And so we have red tape to comply with. Just as a little thing to stay on the back of your mind, is there a way that AEL can, if they're eligible with us, we know what our eligibility requirements are for our students, can they automatically be eligible for some type of Workforce Solution services? That's one of the things that, since we're under the TWC umbrella, we still report to different directors, in our case you, and then Workforce Solutions, another director. So try to facilitate that for the customers, right? Because it's a lot of hoops that they have to jump through to
absolutely
get
absolutely. And you know, I'm glad that Tarrant County is going to be on the academy and can kind of talk about, because they spent the last couple of years really digging into that. But Mary Jo, you specifically, I just wanted to let you and everyone else know. And one of the reasons I didn't really solely focus on the WIOA partner program specifically, because there's so many other board operated programs that I think we could benefit in our relationships with them. Back in October of 2022, so I've been working on this, like chipping away. It's like you said, Mary Jo, it's just like, you got to just like it's like Shawshank Redemption, right? You just keep chipping away at that rock, and pretty soon you're going to find a way out or a way in. But back in October of 2022, we have been working on updating the Choices performance measures. You know, this was a big deal on Mary Jo. I know that you guys in particular were trying to get a referral process for the Choices customers. Well, the boards had, and this was a TWC imposed thing, the performance didn't allow for that, right? It's a disincentive because those individuals had to go to work. Education didn't count for the boards. Now it does. So now those Choices participants, you know, going to our classes, going to GED classes, going to ESL classes now count for performance. So now that opens the conversation, I think, and kind of kicks the door open a little bit and says, hey, you know, we're here and we're a benefit. So thanks for your comments, Mary Jo. Very, very appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, and for your work for understanding the two branches and being able to advocate for us over there on your end with your colleagues.
Absolutely.
So this won't be, I hope, won't be the last time that Mahalia visits our academy. But really, thank you again, and we will take any remaining questions from the chat and try to address them in future events. So, but we're going to move on, and I think, you know, I think that Mahalia talked really well, as did others of you earlier, about you know, the benefits and the mutual benefit of further integration and more coordinated and integrated services. And this academy is called Workforce Integration Academy. And we wanted to just use a framework, you know, to give us a kind of common language for thinking about, well, what do we mean by integration? And so we lifted up this this integration continuum that comes from work of somebody named Bert Spellman, but I found it in work that was focused on vocational rehabilitation and workforce board integration. And so, of course, there's some overlap in adult education and voc rehab, and there are many differences, but nonetheless, the general concepts, I think, will be relevant. So I want to walk you through the framework. And what I want to say is that there are definitions, and we're less concerned about kind of corralling ourselves into definitions and more just having a place to start to think about this work. What does it look like at the beginning? What could it look like aspirationally if we had, you know, sort of full integration? So this is general and generic. So the first stage on the continuum is called isolation. And it's defined as agencies don't recognize the need to communicate, and there is no attempt to communicate about anything. You know, we'll talk later about specific issues, but again, we're just thinking generally now. So isolation is really a lack of communication and a lack of recognizing the need to communicate. The next step on the continuum is communication, where agencies do talk to each other and share some information. The next level is coordination, and where staff from different agencies, in this case, we'd be talking about adult education and workforce, where staff from different agencies work together on a case-by-case basis to coordinate some support. So of course, the focus there is that it's case-by-case, not institution-wide. Collaboration is the fourth stage, where agencies work together project by project. So it's a little bit more global in scope than case by case, than individual learner by learner, but it's project by project, including joint analysis and planning. And then the final step, or integration, defined here is intensive collaboration. Agencies are interdependent, significant sharing of resources with a high level of trust. And of course, trust is something that a number of you talked about as a challenge, and others of you talked about as a strength in your applications. But integration, as you can see here, includes a high level of trust in order for these intensive collaboration to take place. So again, our goal here is just to give us something to kind of a common language without getting too stuck in, well, is this isolation or communication? Well, it depends. But take a minute just to take these in, read them again. I'll just give you a minute for that. And I'm gonna, you can also read them here. We're going to do just a little activity to get a pulse check on thinking very generally. Where would you say that your adult ed program and your workforce board are on the continuum in this current moment? There's no judgment here. We're here to grow and develop our integration efforts so that we move ourselves along the continuum, but we just want to get a general pulse check. And the way that we're going to do that is to use the annotation tools in Zoom. And so you should have, let me just make sure, let me enable annotation. You should now see a little green pencil on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. And if you don't see that, give a raise if you're on screen. If you're joining us by phone, I don't know if I can help you there. Johnine, you don't see the little green pencil?
No, I don't have.
And
a little
Sandra
green-
doesn't?
So,
Well, and actually I'm having some technical difficulties, so it might be my computer, but
So I'm going to invite you to just, anybody who can't, well, so let me tell you about the little green pencil first. If you do see the little green pencil on your lower left, click it to pull up the annotation toolbar. And then on the toolbar, pull down the stamp. And I recommend you use a star or a check mark and just put that stamp or that check mark where you want to say you are on the continuum today. You meaning your adult ed program and your workforce board. And if you can't get the annotation tools working, just feel free to put your comment in the chat. So say we're at isolation or we're at coordination, what have you, but use the chat for that. Sandra, does that help you?
Sandy,
Yes, I was able to see the pencil.
Okay, go
Yes.
ahead, Mark. What do you want to say?
I was just going to say another way you may find it if you're not seeing that is if you click on view up at the top, and then that drop down should have an annotate text there. And then if you click on the annotate, then you'll get the bar there that has the different types.
Thank you. And you want to put it in the column that best defines where you would say that you are, and try to get within the lines, or unless some of you are intentionally on borderlines. And Anne doesn't have it, and I'm wondering if Anne's a co-host and if that might have anything to do with it. Nope. Oh, you found it. That's great. And thanks, Mark, for providing that additional way to see it. All right, so it looks like we have, we're all over, which is what we would have expected. Now, it's so interesting that some of you were finding this at the top, because that's how I usually describe the annotation tools, and I practiced with what I thought would be your view today. So I have to keep learning to give multiple options for finding it. All right, so we're going to pause a minute, and Mark, go ahead and get your screenshot. It looks like we have a high concentration in communication and collaboration. And if anybody's, a number of you are off the board or off out of the column. So if you want to try again to put yourself in the column, that will be just fine. And then we'll move on from here. Mark, did you get the screenshot?
Yep, I did.
Okay, great. So just to say, as you can see, we are all across the board, and that's where we expect it to be. And let me just see, Irene says we're in between collaboration and integration. Great, we'll make sure to take these comments as well to flesh out what we have from the annotation tools. And I'm going to clear them now. So everybody take one last look. And because they travel to the next slide, and we don't want that. All right, so I'm going to pass it back to Mark. Now, we talked very generally in with the introducing the framework and then doing the pulse check on the framework, and Mark's going to give some more concrete specific example of how the framework might be interpreted.
Yeah, I guess I want to, and we can keep it on the slide, but just come back to the overall framework from the last slide where you identified where you would see your program and your integration efforts. And we deliberately didn't ask you to look at it sort of multi-layered, just generally speaking, but we recognize that there are so many elements of a program and of integration. And so we have one example here of recruitment, which would be one program area, but there's so many different ones. And so that's just to say you may feel like you're at integration in some areas and isolation in others. And I think if anyone is at integration across the board in all program areas, I would love to spend a lot of time with you, because that's amazing and it's very rare. And so just want to sort of tease out one example for a program area with recruitment. And what we did here was try to give a little bit more context within that important topic of recruitment when you think about integration with your workforce development board. So starting with isolation, there's services that are promoted and recruitment happen separately or in a silo, so there's really no connection. And then building from there, the next level with communication, there may be some sharing of written recruitment materials, or even just informally mentioning and talking about them. But it's really just at that level, and it's not really coordinated, it's just awareness. And then moving to coordination, now you've got some materials potentially that have information on AEL, Workforce Development Board programs and services. They may do orientation and intake processes separately, but could mention about the other and potentially even some referrals, but it's limited. And then getting to collaboration, where you actually have more, or could have a central point of contact that can connect participants across either agency. And there may be events like a resource fair that are done collaboratively to promote services, and information is shared how to access each partner agency's programs and services. So that's building to collaboration. And then the integration, the best level is where there's established marketing materials together, ongoing events that are integrated, including business services, and really connecting the community and industry partners. I think this is a really important word, strategically, across teams that represent both organizations. So that's the integration level. I want to just say these are just examples. So this is not to say these are the only definitions or ways of sort of getting to collaboration or communication, but we just wanted to give you a little bit more to work off of within within recruitment. And there's not just one way to be at communication or collaboration. And similarly, we've got multiple program areas, so it's not just about recruitment referrals. There's there's other areas like onboarding and outreach and career services and career pathways, and so we'll get into that in time. But just wanted to give you one to look at and provide some examples. So we want to stop there and invite you to unmute yourself or raise your hand or add in the chat box. Just starting with that initial, where would you put yourself in this framework? What was it like to use it? To sort of reflect in general on where your program is. What questions do you have about the framework? And how do you think this framework could help you further develop your integration effort? So just a few questions, and want to invite you to give them some thought, and feel free to unmute yourself or add thoughts in the chat box.
This is Sherry Thomas with Region 5. I like the framework because it gives you a way to measure where you are, and in some regards measure where you've come from. And I especially like it, Mark, when you talked about you might not be like in recruitment in one area, you might be at integration, but in another area. So it also gives you a way to evaluate where you are, assess it, and then instead of trying to deal with integration as a whole, you take and you deal with integration in pieces and components.
Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate you sharing that. And I like what you said about not just where you're at, where you can be, but where you've come from, because there's probably been significant work and time in building those relationships, as Mahalia said before, with your workforce development board. So thank you. Anyone else want to share your thoughts on the framework itself, and or questions that you have?
This is Donna. I have a question. I think the framework is great. However, it truly involves two parties, and I happen to be one of the programs where there's minimum collaboration, our workforce, local workforce, so they'll come and do presentations for our classroom, but there's not much of an exchange beyond that. So these integration, this sounds like the goal, but if you don't have that, I guess, beginning relationship with board, or if they're not as interested in, moving the relationship forward, are they having a similar training to integrate with AEL, perhaps? I don't know, but that's my concern, that will they be as receptive?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Donna, and just the realities that some AEL programs may face with their board of not having much to build on yet. And if they have the same openness and interest in seeing the value. And I don't think there's a silver bullet on this one, but I think the Academy is a place where there may be opportunities to learn from your peers and from any other presenters on strategies to bring them along. So that's one thought. And then I would also say one of the activities as part of the culminating project will be to sit down with the appropriate staff person from the board to start to engage. And so we'll have, you'll have some time between sessions to begin that conversation. And I'll just add, just from a personal level, having worked with a few different workforce development boards in Oregon through the years with varying degrees of interest and openness, you know, some of that takes time, and also it's finding, as Mahalia said earlier, that commonality. I think one of your peers too, of like, what's the sort of the value proposition from both sides. So I appreciate the question, and I feel like you're in the right place with this academy to start to chip away at it, as Mahalia said too. I'm not sure, Sandy, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I mean, I think we know there are challenges in different local partnerships, and there's not one right solution. And so we will try to just grapple with that for each of you locally, you know, sharing broad strategies, but also just helping you problem solve in your particular area. And we, you know, whoever said, like, is there also an integration academy for the workforce side? We hope so, and we do hope that we'll find ways to bring the partners together through this work and beyond. And I think Mark was indicating that, you know, next steps will be to how to really get out and, you know, continue to build those relationships.
I saw there was a comment too from, is it Andrea, about even potentially meeting with them. It may be feel good conversations, but not action oriented. And appreciate you being vulnerable as well and sharing some of those realities, and just look forward to engaging with you and your peers to get past that point and really move into action with a multitude of strategies.
And Juanine says, you know, the same framework and model could be used for the workforce side for sure. It's non contextual in that sense, and it might be a tool that you want to use for those of you who have some relationships and but want to sort of talk about pushing this work further. Maybe you'll do a little self-assessment. We're going to talk about the project and the self-assessment that you're going to do with your own team, but you also might want to take this framework and say, look, let's talk about where we think we are, what the benefits to moving further are, and, you know, use this framework with folks. Janine, somebody just corrected me. Thank you for the correction. And Janine, I apologize for pronouncing your name incorrectly. But yeah, so any of these tools we should talk about, and we will talk about how you might use them, not just internally with AEL, but to engage your workforce partners in thinking differently and thinking more expansively about your work together. And then I think Irene said there are finesses. I love that. Plural finesses, not just finesse, required at every level of the framework as we work towards integration. Absolutely.
Sandy, can I add one thing? Because I think there's it seems like a common thread here of just some historical challenges with boards, and it would make sure with Trey and with the folks from TWC, when we've had a lot of planning for this academy, we've heard and understood that it really is so AEL programs and you as directors can better connect your students and your programs with workforce development board services to better integrate and leverage. And also, secondly, to make sure as best as possible that the workforce development board staff and programs and services have a deeper understanding of AEL and see the benefit and value of collaborating with AEL. So I think it should go both ways, and we'll spend time on that. So it's also bringing them along, as it seems like has been challenging for some folks.
Thank you. Yeah, there's lots to explore and lots to uncover, and we're excited about that. So I'm going to move us along to talk a little bit about the culminating project, and sorry, as I go to the chat, my mouse is sliding around a bit. So let me just tell you first, and some of you may have already found the document, that there are 2 activities that will be due between now and March 30th, which is our next webinar meeting. One is a program self-assessment using the integration framework with your AEL program team. And the second is to read a brief describing integration, 2 different examples of integration efforts. And I'm just gonna stop for a minute, pull down the slides and walk you through a little bit of the culminating project activity. And here we go. Okay, so it looks like the integration framework slide, but it is not, although we are using the integration framework. So it looks like this, and this is I loaded up a PDF version, I think, and a Word version. Certainly the Word version you can use directly and write into. So just an overview, I think Mark talked about this before, that the project is ongoing and iterative. It's something you'll work on over the course of the academy and working with your team, working externally to, you know, research and engage with your board, and overall to guide and inform your integration efforts. And the projects, of course, will be where you really take the frameworks and the concepts and the information we share and apply it locally. Otherwise, without that time to reflect and apply the information locally, this would be hardly that useful to you. So this is an example of something that we really do want you to engage your team members in. A couple of you have talked about, you know, the differences in different program areas. So we have included some examples of what the integration continuum might look like in recruitment, which Mark shared earlier, in assessment, in career services, and career pathways. So 4 program areas, and there may be others, but we wanted to give you some examples. So the reason why it's so important to work with your whole team is that some other staff may have information about, you know, where you are on the continuum that you might not be aware of as a director. So for example, you know, your career navigator may have something to say about recruitment or career services and give examples of why they think, you know, you're in a certain area on the continuum that you're not aware of. Your recruitment person might have, you know, also a different perspective. So pull everybody together, share the continuum with them to, you know, get their, so they're in the same page as you with it, to get their insights into it. And then first just run through the different examples that we've provided, similar to what Mark walked you through for recruitment, assessment, career services. And I just want to say again, or we want to say again, we wanted to provide examples so that this wasn't so abstract, but the examples are just that, examples. This is never going to look just one way. So you could even, you know, look at a program area and say, yeah, this is how we would describe each of those phases on the continuum, because we think it might look differently and could look differently in different places. But we wanted to give some examples just to avoid abstraction. So look through our examples, you know, discuss them, and then here's the blank templates where you're going to take each of those 4 program areas: recruitment, assessment, career services, career pathways, and you don't have to build out your own examples for all 5. You don't need to make anything up. You just want to talk about where your current level of integration is. Again, using those same definitions, where your current level of integration is for recruitment. Why did you choose this rating? What are examples of practices in this program area that illustrate where you are in the continuum? And I think that will be clear why you would want to engage other colleagues in that work. So we gave you 4 program area examples, and then we've given you 4 blank templates with these prompts for recruitment, assessment, career services, and career pathways. So that's activity 1, and you'll definitely want to put aside some time to be with your colleagues to, you know, share the framework with them, and then to really tap their thinking, your collective thinking about each of these areas and where you are and what your examples are. And then there's some reflection questions that follow that. Again, I think this would be really important to do with your whole team. And then activity number 2 is a reading assignment, and that's primarily for you, the Academy members. You're certainly welcome to share the readings with your colleagues. But there's two examples. One is upskilling adult learners with disabilities, and that's a brief that the National Skills Coalition, and I was a part of the team that worked on that in Texas, talking about Austin Community College and also rural capital area and the work that they were doing integrating Voc Rehab and Workforce Solutions and AEL services. And another one comes from my home state of Massachusetts, which is about partnerships between adult ed, what are called outstation coordinators, and our Mass Hire Career Centers, which are your Workforce Solutions offices. So there's two examples. Just choose one to read. You're welcome to read them both and come prepared to discuss your thoughts and reflections about the one that you read. I'll stop for questions. I just want to say that you should definitely write in the Word document, the Word version. We're going to put a space up on the COP for you to post your self-assessments and your responses to these questions. So definitely it's a thinking, talking, reflecting, and writing activity. There aren't written responses required for the second activity, the reading, but for the self-assessment and the reflection questions, there are for sure. Let me pause a minute and see if there are questions about this. And I welcome anybody to unmute if you have a question that you didn't put in the chat.
Mine is not a question. It's an apology to the team. I was the green check mark on there because I didn't know how to take it off. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I saw that. I was looking at the chat like, oh, somebody went crazy with the annotation.
Sorry,
And I
it
had
was
cleared it, but it
Janine.
must have bounced around after that. No apologies needed, Janine. Thank you.
I will own it. I own it. I was really trying to figure it out and I couldn't. And I think maybe it did it twice. Sorry.
That's
Did you finally
okay.
figure out you have to hit save for it to go away out of it? Okay, yeah.
Love that, Irene. I got it now.
That's funny. So again, this document is already loaded to the COP, and we'll let you know where the space is to put it back up when you're done. And really just has to be by the time we come together again on March 30th. So you have, you know, probably almost 5 weeks to get it done, but do make sure you give yourself some time because you can see there's a couple of steps. Mark, did I miss anything that you want to add about the project?
No, I would just emphasize again the opportunity to engage with your teams in this, not only because it hopefully will enhance your responses and the examples for each of the program areas and the levels and the reflection questions at the end, but it will also bring them along in your participation in the academy and understanding the tools that we're introducing and sharing with you and engaging in as part of this culminating project.
So here it is in summary again. Program self-assessment using the framework with your AEL program team and read the brief description by March 30th. All right, so we're in the home stretch. I'm gonna pass it back to Mark to take us to the next steps.
Yeah, I do see there's a question first from Andrew.
Oh, is there a specific goal for the percentage of co-enrolled customers? That's not a question I can answer. Any TWC folks want to take that on here at this juncture or punt for later?
I will just say that I don't think there's a specific goal. However, we have incentivized this in recent years with our co-enrollment awards. So you're always shooting to be the best if you want to get some incentive funds and performance funds related to co-enrollment.
Thanks, Mahalia. And that's great to hear. There is incentive funding for that. So I know we just have a few minutes here. We wanted to make sure everyone is familiar again with the schedule ahead. So we do have our next session on March 30th, a second webinar. And then we'll get to meet everyone face-to-face in Arlington in April for a full day session, another webinar late May, and then the final session for the Academy face-to-face in San Antonio in mid-June. And so just making sure that you have those times blocked off on your calendar. And then just want to remind you again for the next session to complete the activities number 1 and 2 for the culminating project But we did want to just move over to the professional development portal, make sure everyone is in it and aware of how to access, first to find the Academy, which I think most of you, if not all, have, and introducing yourselves, but just how it's organized. So we just wanted to take a minute here. So finding the Academy, then, as you can see, and apologize if this is like second nature because you all have used the portal for other work, but we do have a main page where you can see Mike's invitation to introduce yourselves. Then we've got specific topics organized. So right now it's just a folder with the introductions, and then that folder with slides and handouts will be organized by each of our sessions. So for now, it's just the kickoff session today. So we will get any additional documents that we don't have yet. I think Mahalia's slide deck in there, but it's all organized there. And as someone who's newer from out of state to the portal, just understanding how to navigate and, you know, back up to the next level, and then you can you should be able to find everything in the community of practice here for this Academy. And anything else, Sandy, that we wanted to touch on with the portal? I mean, you can see there's a separate tab for members as well, so you can see who is part of this group, just organized by participants. And we will really use it and encourage you to use it actively between sessions as well.
I just want to make sure people saw that Olga put the link to the evaluation in the, is that what you were starting to say?
No, I was just saying unmute Sandy because I think you're muted for a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Well, anyway, do you see in the chat the evaluation link? And then I think you know who to go to if you have any troubles with the portal. I think that's PD Train, is that correct? Train PD, I always say it backwards. And then just we have 5 minutes left for any last questions. And also we wanted to invite you to just share one takeaway in the chat. Any questions about just all the information we've shared today, what our goals and objectives are, what our schedule is, what our aims are with the first culminating project activities? All right, then let's move to the takeaway, share one takeaway in the chat. A new tidbit, a new idea, a new question that you're going to leave here with. We're just going to take a minute to let you gather your thoughts and write them. And while you're each gathering your thoughts, or those of you who haven't posted yet, there's really some great takeaways here. Thank you. And also will help this, your thoughts will help us think about our next steps as well for planning. I just will close us out by saying thank you so much for being the pilot case for the inaugural cohort for the first Workforce Integration Academy. I think I know Mark and I both feel really honored to be doing this work. It's really groundbreaking work. I think in one of our planning meetings, Anne said, well, you know, where, like, do you work around the country? Are there other states who are doing something like this, a Workforce Integration Academy? And we just said, not that we're aware of. So you're all really, really forging new ground and really important ground. And with all the diversity of experience and expertise that you bring to this. Mark, any last words you want to share?
No, it's yeah, it's a pleasure to meet everyone and start to learn about your programs, your strengths and opportunities for further integration. Just a few reminders of the evaluation, which is in the COP for this session, that allows us and the larger team with TWC and ESC6 to continue to build and enhance these webinars and sessions. And then just a reminder to engage with your teams on those 2 activities in preparation for the next webinar. And just appreciate getting the chance again to work with you all, and look forward to seeing you next month.
All right, well, we'll close out then. Thank you, everybody, so much for your time and your attention and your thinking through this work.